Listeners, are you ready for your monthly literary adventure? We now have the BFF Book Club. Join us each month to explore a new book. After reading, connect with fellow book lovers and meet the author in a live interview. Can't make it live? Don't worry. We'll send you the recording. You can find all the upcoming book club selections at www.bookishflights.com/read/BFF book club. Hi, I'm Kara Infante, and this is Bookish Flights. In each episode, I chat with one bookish guest as we take some time to sample and savor the pairing recommendations from their bookish flight. We hope to give you suggestions to cultivate your TBR list and nurture your leisure time through books. In today's episode, I am chatting with Liz Shipton. Liz is a freelance writer, indie author, and full-time off-grid live-aboard sailor. She is currently sailing around the world with her boyfriend and her dog, turning her real-life adventures into speculative fiction. Welcome to the show, Liz.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yes, well, I feel like we are always so much more than these bios we have. So can you tell us a little bit more detail about who you are?
Sure. I am an author and adventurer, I guess you could say. Many people actually probably know me best from TikTok and Instagram, where I
Okay.
post these sort of silly, funny videos that poke fun at romance tropes, and particularly like the men in romance books. So that's actually probably how most people know me. I also currently I write speculative fiction sort of based on my own sailing adventures. So I've been living on a sailboat for the last 3 years with my boyfriend and dog, sailing from our home in California. So far, we've sailed down the west coast of the United States, through Central America, through the Panama Canal, and we're currently in the Caribbean.
Okay.
So a lot of what I write draws from that experience. And then I sort of filter it through a speculative, like fantasy, dystopian, sci-fi lens and turn it into books.
Okay, wonderful. When you started out, did you have your, charted your path you were going to go, or do you kind of, is this more free form that you're doing?
Um, that's such a great question. We're like, that's our main conversation at the moment. Um, we definitely had a plan when we started out, and things changed along the way.
Yeah.
So we knew, when we first left, it was like, okay, we know we want to get to Baja, California. We want to get to La Paz in Mexico. So we
Okay.
did that. And then from there, it was kind of like, okay, well, now what? And so that's kind of been the whole trip, is like, we'll pick, sort of the next leg, and then we get there, and then we sort of think, okay, well, now what? Originally, our plan was to cross the Pacific and go over to French Polynesia,
Sure.
but we have a dog with us, and it just sort of ended up not really being, it wasn't going to work with the dog. So we came through the Panama Canal instead, and now we've been in the Caribbean for almost a year now at this
Wow.
point.
Okay.
Yeah, and then from here, we sort of don't, we don't really know what's next. Again, we were thinking about crossing the Atlantic, but again, it doesn't seem like that's really going to work with the dog. So, yeah, we're actually sort of in a planning phase at the moment of kind of figuring out like what's next and where are we going and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I imagine crossing either the Atlantic or the Pacific is a long time without seeing any land in the
Yeah,
distance.
multiple weeks for
Yeah.
sure. Certainly people do it with their dogs, but we just sort of didn't really think it was right for us. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that is quite the adventure. I think that most people could say they have never done this adventure, and that is amazing. I have the travel bug myself. I love seeing the world. So this is amazing what you guys are doing. And that you're pulling it into your books. I think what a great way to document and have these memories kind of cemented within your books.
Yeah, yeah.
So, can you tell the listeners? I know you have a series out. Can you tell the listeners a little bit about it, entice them to want to read it?
Sure. All right. Well, so the series is called the Thalassic series. It is set in the like a near future dystopian water world, where sort of the only way to get around this world is by sailing.
Okay.
However, there's kind of like a high tech aspect of it too. So the whole world is sort of governed or ruled by this biotech company that may or may not be evil. It's kind of your classic dystopian,
Sure.
is the government evil situation. And the main two characters are two young people who, so the main character is this girl, Bird. She's sort of a train wreck. She really doesn't have her life together at all. She makes a lot of really poor decisions. And then her sailing instructor, who is the sort of like foil to her, kind of her polar opposite, very put together, very straightforward, very sort of, knows what he's doing. Through some poor decisions on Bird's part, they end up having to sail across this dystopian water world together. And along the way, they meet pirates, they deal with weather, they rescue a dog, they bring down the government, and they fall in love. And yeah, so it's sort of like a fun swashbuckling adventure in a dystopian water world.
I love it. I also love the word swashbuckling.
Yep, it's a great word.
So, and from my understanding, you have these, they are spicy, but you also have a YA. Is it the same books or are they like a different
Yeah.
version of them? Okay, tell us about that.
Yeah, well, so that the books actually started out as a YA series. I wanted to do, like a
Okay.
YA dystopian romance, sort of like Hunger Games or Divergent.
Yeah.
That was sort of because that was when I came back to writing. Those were the books that I really remembered as
Yeah.
really loving, in my childhood. So this book started out as YA. So there is a version currently of the books as the YA version. And then
Okay.
as I started to get more into book talk and social media and kind of realized that there's a huge market for spicy books, I started thinking like, well, what if I wrote a spicy book? Like, would people read it?
Yeah.
How would it do? So I went back and I wrote some like bonus scenes basically for the YA book. And then I aged up the characters and I ended up liking it so much that I just put the scenes into the book where they're supposed to be, made the characters more like new adult as opposed to young adult, and then just released a spicy version of the
Oh,
same
cool.
series.
Okay.
So yeah, so right now there's two. There's the one, they're exactly the same, except that the spicy one has those spicy scenes in it. The YA just is without those scenes.
Wonderful. Okay. All
Yeah.
right, listeners, you've got two options. So you could even do like a book club, I imagine, with your older kids, which could be really fun with that.
I've had some people who they'll order the spicy version for themselves and then they order the YA for their daughter, I think, and both read it together. And I thought that was pretty cool. Like, yeah,
Yeah. I
those are really
always
fun.
think of that like with my oldest is only he's about to be 9 and so we're not
Mm.
quite there yet, but for me I'm like I feel like what a way to connect with your kids through a book club that you're doing together. And of course I love reading, so that sounds like right up my alley and he does too, but I'm like I think it could be a great way to connect with your children. So
Yeah.
and the first book is called Salt, right?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, so if you're new to the series, grab Salt. So, as the readers of your books are reading, what questions do you hope they'd ponder as they're reading the series?
So a lot of the themes in the series are to do with like climate change,
Okay.
tech creep, and mental health issues and addiction. So the main character is struggling with a lot of undiagnosed mental health issues, and as a result of that, is also struggling with alcohol abuse. So all the books are sort of this like fun adventure, and there's a lot of like snarky banter and all that kind of stuff. There is actually some like pretty serious like things going on underneath. And so yeah, it's like the world came about because of as a result of kind of climate change and social inequality sort of gone awry and capitalism run amok and that kind of thing. The world is sort of governed by a tech company, basically,
Okay.
who has sort of taken over from the government because the governments are no longer really functioning. So, I mean, yeah, I guess these are just sort of the things that I would love readers to kind of like take with them when they are done reading the book is yeah, just the sort of I guess sort of a lot of the reviews I get of the book are like, "Hi, this was a dystopian future, but it sort of feels like what's happening now." And I guess
I was
that's like
thinking that
kind
as
of,
you
I
were
guess,
talking. I was like, oh gosh.
like it's not that far in the future type situation type idea. So yeah, I guess that's maybe sort of the big picture and big questions that I would want readers to kind of be thinking about as they're reading the book.
Yeah, and I know I'm not on Book Talk, but on Bookstagram, I feel like people are always talking about mental health representation in books, and so how
Yes.
important that is. So that's wonderful.
Yeah, I think definitely that's something that, I mean, in all my books I'm currently writing. So I actually recently signed a book deal for a traditionally published book. And the book that
Congratulations.
I'm writing, thanks. The book that I'm writing for that also kind of digs into the same kind of themes, mental health. All of my main characters are going to be struggling with their mental health, basically.
Yeah. And well, I think we all sometimes are, right?
Right.
Life
Yeah,
throws all sorts of
exactly.
things at us that we're always managing,
Yeah.
and well, congratulations on that. That was going to be one of my other
Thanks.
questions is, are you still
Oh,
writing and what are you working on? And so that's amazing.
yeah.
Is there a timeline for that, or you're still working through writing that now?
Yeah, so it's crazy because the trad publishing like life cycle is so different from indie publishing. So
Okay.
I actually just finished the manuscript for it, and I will be turning that in August.
Okay.
And then basically the book doesn't come out until July 2025, so like a year from now.
Wow.
They don't even, I can't actually really tell you anything about the book yet because they
Yeah.
haven't really announced it. So I think we announce it in August, and then there's a cover reveal in like maybe October, November. And then 9 months later, the book comes out. So right now, I'm like, I just finished the manuscript. I'm like so excited about it. I'm like, God, I can't wait for
Yeah.
everyone to read this. And now I gotta wait for like a year
Yeah. Hurry up and
before
wait.
anyone's, yeah, before anyone's gonna see it. But it's great. I mean, it's also, I mean, the flip side of that obviously is that I have an actual like marketing team behind me now,
That's amazing.
and like a design team to where I email someone, I'm like, hey, it'd be really cool if this book had a map. And she's like, great, yeah, I'll get right on that and have someone make it for you. And really? And I don't have to pay for it or like hunt down someone on
To do
Fiverr? That's,
this. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So that's very exciting.
What have you learned about yourself through writing?
Oh man. So many things. So the series, the dystopian series, my indie series, was definitely me sort of exploring, processing, I guess, the journey that we've
Sure.
been on. And my it's been my way of kind of documenting it, but also sort of really like honing my thoughts about it,
Hmm.
which has been great. It's also been a process of me sort of coming to terms with a lot of my own mental health issues, my own journey to sobriety, which I've now been sober for like 3 years. So as I've mentioned, the main character is
Congratulations.
struggling with alcohol abuse, and that was sort of me, sort of, yeah, just processing a lot of my own kind of issues with that. And then I've also realized that I really, 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 really enjoy writing. It is literally probably the only thing I would really like to be doing at any given moment in time. So if there's a choice between doing a thing and writing, I will pretty much always pick writing every time. So that's really great to know, and I hope that I get to keep doing it for a very, very long time.
Yeah, that's a wonderful thing to learn. I went to the dentist yesterday, and the dental
Mhm.
hygienist, I came in with a book, right? I always bring it if in case it's a long wait. And she was like, "Oh, a woman after my own heart." She's like, "To be honest, I'd rather be reading than be here." And I
Uh-huh.
was like, "I can't say I blame you. That's why I bring my book everywhere. Maybe I can sneak in 5 minutes because I'd rather be reading most times."
Yeah. Yeah.
So, well, let's switch gears a little bit and let's talk about who you are as a reader. What genres do you
Sure.
enjoy reading?
So it's funny. I write kind of in the romance genre, I guess you could consider it, but I don't actually read a lot of romance. I mostly tend to read, I actually read a lot of classics
Okay.
at the moment. I have been reading, I tried to start Salman Rushdie's, oh God, I'm blanking on the title. Oh, Satanic Verses.
Yeah.
So that's something I'm sort of like working my way through right now. A lot of Kazuo Ishiguro. I'm not sure if you're familiar.
Yeah. Hmm.
Some of my absolute favorite books. And then, obviously I'm a big like Douglas Adams fan, and um Ursula K. Le Guin, Left Hand of Darkness, I think we're actually going to talk about in
Yeah,
this is part of my book flight. Um so yeah, a lot of that. And then have been, as I started writing the YA series, I started reading a little bit more YA again, just because I was kind of like, if I'm going to write in this genre, I should probably read it a little bit and really
sure.
see kind of what the expectations of the genre are and that kind of thing. I discovered Legendborn in that way. Absolutely loved Legendborn. I thought that was super fun, great book. But yeah, so I'd say, I guess I'm not one of those people who reads a book every week or even every month, honestly. I'm a very slow reader. I'm kind of a deliberate reader. I really am sort of like picky about what I read, I guess. I'm not a person who's just like going through books all the
Sure.
time. But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and then I guess I was going to ask, with your writing and your life, like where do you find time to read within your day?
It's a great question. Yeah, so I do, that's partly why I don't read, is because I do spend a lot of time writing.
Yeah,
I think that's kind of what that's mainly how I spend my time, as opposed to reading. Um, so yeah, but I mean, at the same time, we live on a boat. We do have the luxury of time to spend.
sure.
So it's, unfortunately, I can't read while we're sailing because I get extremely seasick.
I didn't
But
even think about that.
if there's a day, like a bad anchor or whatever, where it's just sort of, hanging around, not doing much, and I don't have anything to write that day, then yeah, I'll take a look into a book and spend a few hours.
Yeah. Where has been your favorite place you guys have visited while sailing?
Oh, such a good question. There's a few. I mean, I loved Baja California.
Okay.
Is just really kind of special. A lot of it is still very remote. There are like little fishing villages that are really quite far from anything. There's a lot of really pretty spectacular natural beauty. The Sea of Cortez is a kind of a tough place to sail just because of the way the weather is, but the sea itself is really beautiful, and the surrounding region. I really loved the west coast of Panama, actually,
Okay.
which was kind of surprising to me. Like, you don't, when you think of like a real tropical vacation, or, going somewhere with that kind of Caribbean vibe, you don't think Panama, but it definitely has that, like, there's like white sandy beaches and
Oh,
palm trees
beautiful.
and super blue turquoise water. Yeah, so Panama really beautiful. Costa Rica was nice for sure. A lot of the jungle we were
Yeah.
able to kind of like be right on the edge of in the boat.
Well, listeners, if you need some travel ideas, there you go. My husband and I, we just
Yeah.
went to Cabo for our a
Oh,
birthday
nice.
trip. Yeah, my mom came and watched the kids, and so we went down to Baja, California,
Hmm.
and it was beautiful, and kind of just even learning like the landscape down there a little bit. So that was fun. Well, you have also been so gracious to bring a book flight for us today. So can you tell us
Hmm.
a little bit
Hmm.
about how you chose these books?
Yeah, I think I was going for sort of a like women adventuring theme. So, all of these books feature, I guess you could call them strong female leads, who are out there on an adventure. Actually, that's not true. I guess Left Hand of Darkness, the main character is a guy, but there's some interesting like gender stuff going on in that book, which I think is why I picked that one.
Okay.
But yeah, so I mean, Al Sarafi and Swell are both stories about women sailing, I guess.
Okay.
Well, so let's start with the adventures of Amina Al-Sarafi. So this is the story about an older woman, first of all. So this is not your like typical teenager or 20 something year old going off on an adventure coming of age story. The main character is a middle-aged woman who is a mother, who used to be a really notorious pirate and kind of gets pulled into like a one last job kind of situation. So
Okay.
it almost has like an Ocean's 11 kind of like heist movie feel where she's like putting her old team back together and then going out on this pirate ship to sail. She has to basically rescue the granddaughter of like a wealthy friend. And there's a lot of so there's fantasy element to it. There's a lot of really interesting like lore. She gains magical powers throughout the book. There's like a bit of romance with her and her like old ex-husband, but that's definitely not the focus of the book, which I also kind of liked. Like it's really more about like this like women heisting out on the open seas. There's an interesting subplot with one of the younger main characters that I don't want to there's kind of a like a plot twist to that,
Okay.
so I don't want to give it away, but
Sure.
yeah, I really liked how it was sort of focused on an older woman first of all,
Yeah.
and not so much focused on the romance, and really a good, like we used the word swashbuckling earlier, it's like a real good swashbuckle of a book.
Okay. That one sounds great because I know I've
Yeah,
had people ask me they're looking for like not the like you said the younger characters like I want a character that's more my age like what and so
yeah,
this would be a great one for that. So
yeah, it's definitely great for that.
okay, so this was The Adventures of Amina Al Sarafi by Shannon
Hmm.
Chakraborty.
Yes.
Okay, and then what is the second book you brought today?
So Swell is it's actually not a fictional book. It's like an autobiographical memoir type thing,
Okay.
by Liz Clark, who sort of did a similar thing to what my boyfriend and I are doing, but she did it on her own. So she was 22 and she was living in Santa Barbara. She bought a sailboat and just sort of like set off into the ocean. And she was a surfer, so very much connected to the sea and really loved, the nautical world.
Sure.
And it's just a great kind of story of, she wasn't necessarily super competent like when she set out. She just kind of had a dream and she went after it. And it's even though it's not fictional, it's very um like grips you and kind of keeps you on the edge of your seat, if that makes sense. um and
Okay.
it's just, yeah, it's a great adventure story of a girl just kind of deciding to do a thing and then going out into the ocean and doing it.
And that's what when you were talking about when we were talking earlier about sailing, I'm like, this would be a world I would know nothing about. And kudos to
Hmm.
her for like, I don't really know what I'm doing, but going for it.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah. And you learn a lot. I mean, she did cross the Pacific, and so you kind of get to see again, like all of the places that she visited, and she writes about them and her experiences there and the people she meets and all that kind of stuff. It's a great, like travel adventure book.
sure. Okay. Sounds
Yeah,
right up my
yeah.
alley. Thank you for sharing that. So that was Swell by Liz Clark. And then what's the last book you brought today?
So I believe it was The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula K. Le Guin, which I haven't actually read in a while.
Sure.
So anyone who has read it, forgive me if I like forget things or whatever, or miss things out. But it's a great sci-fi novel. It was published in 1969, so quite a long time ago. And it has a sort of real progressive view of like gender and sexuality. So the main character is this astronaut, I guess you could call him, who is a human native of Terra, which is, kind of like Earth, goes to a new planet, the planet of Gethin, and um, his mission is basically they're trying to form like a UN of planets, I think, if I remember
Okay.
correctly. And so his mission is to sort of get this planet to join the UN or whatever. The people on this planet are ambisexual, so they have no fixed sex. So,
Okay.
for like 1969, it's like sort of an interesting, um, I mean, you could say progressive, like understanding of like
Sure.
gender and that kind of thing. It's known as like kind of a feminist science fiction book. And so a lot of the novel is like exploring the ways that this culture is different from the culture of Earth and how their ambisexuality and sort of genderlessness affects that. How, their approach to things is colored by the fact that they don't have like fixed, as much as we have fixed genders, that they don't have that.
Sure.
There's the sort of the last third of the book, the two main characters. So there's the main male character, and then his, I guess you could call it. I mean, it's not a romantic relationship. It's a really interesting relationship, but it's like the person on the planet who's sort of been who was assigned to liaise with him.
Sure. Okay.
They end up through a lot of shenanigans and political backstabbing and all that kind of stuff, getting kicked out of the citadel or whatever, and they have to cross this like frozen wasteland together. And that's kind of like the whole last third of the book is just them like in a tent walking across this like tundra. And I don't know why, but it's some of my favorite writing, that last third of that book.
Okay.
It's just really beautiful the way that she describes the snow and how savage it is and how brutal, and these two characters' relationship and the bond that they kind of form as they're doing that. Yeah, it's just a really, really beautiful few chapters of the book.
Yeah. Wow. And for being written in 1969, what
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, like you said, I guess progressive would be the right word there for that time period and, today. So,
Yeah, yeah.
sounds
There are
great.
certainly, I mean, so like, when I first read it, I've read it twice now, actually. And when I first read it, I kind of thought I was a little annoyed because if I remember correctly, I think the genderless people are really more coded as men, as like their
Sure.
normal
Yeah.
state, and then they sort of like take on more female qualities when it's like their mating season or whatever. So I would say there's like, it's not perfect, there's definitely issues with it,
Sure.
but for having been written in 1969 and for being like as progressive as it was for that time, it's really, it's a good read.
Okay. All right. So that was The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula K. Le Guin. And
Mhm.
how I love to end our show here is with our bonus pairing. So these are just a speed round of questions you can answer really quick. So, are you a rereader?
Sometimes, yeah. If there, I mean, I think as with everyone, if there's a book you really, really love, I would say I reread passages maybe more than like entire
Sure.
books. Yeah.
Go back and live in that moment of the book.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then what is one book you've read that has changed your life?
Oh man, changed my life. I have to think about that. Um, Actually, this is gonna sound this is kind of funny, but so ACOTAR, have you read or are you familiar with like Sarah J. Maas and
I'm
that
definitely
whole
familiar
world?
with it. I have not delved in yet because I know it's
All right.
gonna be a big commitment.
It's a commitment for sure. But so until I had read um that book one, and I guess more like book two of that series, I actually did not know that quote unquote spicy books were a thing. I didn't know about that whole like
Realm.
genre. And now that's like what I'm writing. So I guess you could say that changed my life. I don't necessarily like, I have problems with those books. I don't think they're super amazing, but that definitely affected my writing in a big way.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And then where is your favorite place to read?
In a hammock. I
Oh,
really do love to
so
read in a
nice.
hammock. That's a good time.
Absolutely. And then lastly, what are you reading next?
Hang on, I have a list here. I have my
Okay.
TBR on my computer. Give me 1 second and I can pull it up and I can tell you. Okay, next up, I have Yellowface, I believe,
Oh,
by
yeah.
R.F. Kuang. That's one I've
Okay.
been meaning to read for a while. So, I'm looking forward to getting into that.
Yeah, we had that on an episode in the 80s, but it was about books set in the publishing world and it really intrigued me. So it is now on my TBR as well. I haven't gotten there. So,
Yeah.
well, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I know your time is precious and I appreciate all you've given me.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a really, really nice chat.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for listening to this episode today with Liz Shipton and her book flight of books that include strong female characters on sailing adventures. We'd love to hear what other books you'd pair with this book flight at bookishflights.com. That is also where you can find more information about today's book flight or other books that we talked about. I want to inspire a community of readers. So whenever you share a post about what you are reading or what you are reading next, especially if you have heard about it on the show, please tag us on Facebook or Instagram at Bookish Flights. If you enjoyed the show, please head over to Apple Podcasts and leave a review. Your review not only helps the show, but it also helps the podcast to reach others. Make sure you are subscribed on Apple Podcasts or Spotify to make sure you will not miss an episode. That's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. As Emma Thompson said, I think books are like people in the sense that they'll turn up in your life when you most need them. Cheers to you, dear readers. Until next time.